The old house stood silent, shrouded in the hush of history. The new owners, the Thompson family, were excited to make it their own, but this house held a darkness they could never have imagined. It began with a renovation, a wall demolished revealing a hidden cavity, and inside something impossible. Notes, dozens of them, covered in faded ink and cryptic messages. The Thompsons' curiosity was piqued. Little did they know they had stumbled upon a terrifying mystery, one that would turn their dream home into a nightmare. The house had a past, a long dark history that stretched back over a century. The Thompsons knew little about its previous occupants, but now, the walls themselves seemed to whisper their stories. The notes mentioned names, dates, events that matched up with historical records. It was as if the house itself was alive, bearing witness to the lives and deaths of those who had crossed its threshold. Sarah, the mother, couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The notes were becoming more frequent, more detailed, and they seemed to be getting closer to the present day. One note in particular sent a chill down her spine. It mentioned a child who would be born under a blood moon, and Sarah was pregnant, due any day now. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, suffocating, the air thick with a sense of dread. John, the father, dove into research. He scoured historical archives, old newspapers, anything that could shed light on the house's past. He discovered a string of unexplained disappearances, strange accidents, even whispers of madness and suicide, all connected to the house. It was as if the house itself was cursed, feeding off the energy of its inhabitants. The notes grew more specific, more threatening. They spoke of accidents waiting to happen, of darkness closing in, and then, the nightmares began. Vivid, terrifying dreams that bled into their waking hours. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. The house was changing them, driving them slowly insane. The family began to suspect they weren't alone in the house. Footsteps echoed in the dead of night. Objects moved on their own. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. They were being watched, stalked by something unseen, something malevolent. The notes had warned them, but they were too late. Their young daughter, Emily, began drawing disturbing pictures, grotesque figures with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. She claimed they were the shadow people, the ones who lived in the walls, the ones who whispered to her in the night. The Thompsons were living a nightmare. Every creak of the floorboard, every whisper of the wind sent shivers down their spines. The very first note they pulled from the wall was innocuous, almost disappointingly so. It spoke of groceries, mundane, everyday things, milk, eggs, bread, a list scrawled in hurried handwriting, dated next to the items, a date 20 years in the future. John chuckled, showing it to Sarah. Someone had a serious case of the Mondays, he joked. The renovation continued, and with each passing day, more notes appeared, tucked behind baseboards, hidden under floorboards, concealed within the walls themselves. Each one a glimpse into the future, some mundane, others increasingly strange. One mentioned a solar eclipse, another a rare comet sighting. Events verifiable yet unsettling in their accuracy. John, initially skeptical, found himself drawn deeper into the mystery. The coincidences were becoming too frequent to ignore. A knot of unease began to tighten in his stomach. Determined to find a rational explanation, Sarah delved into the history of the house. She spent hours at the local library, sifting through dusty records, old newspaper clippings, and property deeds. She learned the house had been built in the early 1900s by a sea captain and his wife. It had changed hands several times over the years, but there was no mention of anything unusual. One name, however, kept appearing in her research: Amelia Wright, the sea captain's wife. According to local lore, Amelia was a recluse, rumored to be eccentric, even touched by madness. She was said to have spent hours locked in her room, writing feverishly in her journals. Journals that, according to legend, disappeared after her death. As Sarah delved deeper into Amelia's past, John focused on the more practical aspects of the mystery. He began a thorough search of the house, determined to find a logical explanation for the notes. He examined every nook and cranny, every inch of the walls and floors, convinced there had to be a hidden room, a secret passage, something that would explain how the notes were being planted. The attic, in particular, fascinated him. It was a dark, dusty space filled with discarded furniture, old trunks, and forgotten memories. The air was thick with the scent of time and decay. John spent hours up there, meticulously examining every inch, convinced he would find something significant. One afternoon, while searching through a pile of old books, John stumbled upon a small, leather-bound journal hidden beneath a stack of faded photographs. The cover was blank, the pages filled with spidery handwriting. He recognized the writing instantly. Panic welled up in John's chest. He scrambled back, dropping the journal as if it were on fire. He scrambled down the attic ladder, his breath catching in his throat. He had to tell Sarah. They had to get out of the house, now. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed, as John frantically explained what he found in the attic. Her initial skepticism had given way to a growing unease. The notes, the journal, Lily's increasingly disturbing behavior. It all pointed to something deeply unsettling. June 10th. John said, his voice trembling. Time was slipping away. The relentless ticking of the clock seemed to amplify the oppressive atmosphere in the house. June 10th loomed over them like a specter, each passing second a hammer blow to their dwindling hope. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by nightmares steeped in the dread that permeated their waking hours. John, consumed by a restless energy, paced the living room floor, his mind racing. He tried to rationalize the situation, desperately seeking a logical explanation for the cryptic warnings and unsettling events. Was it an elaborate prank? A cruel hoax designed to drive them out of their minds? But deep down a primal fear gnawed at him, whispering that the truth was far more terrifying. Sarah, her usual pragmatism shaken to its core, sought answers in the annals of the past. She immersed herself in local history. The house itself seemed to react to their mounting fear, its presence growing more menacing with each passing hour. Unexplained noises echoed through the once welcoming halls, floorboards creaked under the weight of unseen footsteps. Whispers, barely audible yet undeniably present, seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. John, his nerves stretched taut, felt a constant sensation of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed his every move. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision. Fleeting glimpses of movement, gone as quickly as they appeared, left him questioning his sanity. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving him teetering on the precipice of madness. Sarah, her faith tested like never before, sought solace in prayer. The crucifix she clutched felt cold against her skin. Driven by a desperate need to understand, Sarah intensified her research into Amelia Wright, convinced that the key to their survival lay buried in the past. She scoured historical archives, poring over old journals, letters, and personal effects, piecing together the fragments of a life shrouded in mystery and sorrow. As she delved deeper into Amelia's story, a chilling pattern emerged. Amelia, like Lily, possessed a sensitivity to the unseen world, a gift that manifested in disturbing visions and premonitions. Her journal spoke of a darkness that haunted the house, a malevolent entity that fed on fear and despair. Amelia's words, echoing across time, sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She realized with growing horror that they were not simply dealing with a malevolent presence, but a being of immense power and malice, tethered to the house, feeding on the terror of its occupants, and they were trapped in its web. Clutching Amelia's journal, Sarah raced home, her mind ablaze with a mix of fear and determination. She had to warn John and the children. The house was no longer a sanctuary, it was a battleground. With each passing hour, the entity's presence grew stronger, its grip on their sanity tightening. They had to act fast to find a way to fight back before it consumed them completely. Amelia's journal, their only guide in this nightmare, offered a glimmer of hope. It spoke of a ritual, a way to bind the entity, to send it back to the abyss from whence it came. But the ritual was dangerous, requiring a sacrifice, a willingness to confront the darkness head-on. Fear warred with determination in their hearts as they gathered in the living room, the epicenter of the entity's power. The air crackled with unseen energy, the shadows writhed with anticipation. They were outmatched, outgunned, but not defeated. They had each other, and the faint glimmer of hope offered by a long-dead woman's final act of defiance. John, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands, began to recite the words of the ritual, his voice echoing in the stillness. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen power. The shadows danced more violently, as if agitated by the challenge to their dominion. The entity was aware of their intentions. It would not relinquish its hold easily. The house seemed to convulse around them as the entity, enraged by their defiance, unleashed its fury. The lights flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. Objects rattled and shook, as if caught in an unseen earthquake. The air crackled with static electricity, raising goosebumps on their skin. A blood-curdling shriek, inhuman and filled with rage, echoed through the house, seeming to claw at the very edges of their sanity. John, his resolve momentarily shaken by the sheer malevolence in that sound, stumbled back, his eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the unholy noise. The candles, as if extinguished by an unseen hand, sputtered and died, plunging the room into an oppressive darkness. Sarah, her maternal instincts kicking in, pulled her children close, shielding them with her body. Fear, primal and all-consuming, threatened to overwhelm her, but she fought it back with a ferocity born of love. She would not let this entity take her children. She would fight, even if it meant sacrificing herself. The wallpaper behind them, as if peeled back by an unseen hand, ripped open, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. Two glowing eyes filled with an ancient malice and an insatiable hunger peered out from the abyss, their gaze fixed on the family huddled before them. They were trapped, their fate hanging precariously in the balance. The entity had come for them. Sarah, guided by a desperate hope, raced against time. She had to find something that could shed light on Amelia's warnings. The library had become her sanctuary. She delved into the town's dark history. Local folklore became her guide. Tales of disappearances and strange lights sent shivers down her spine. They spoke of an ancient evil, the Night Weaver, a being of pure darkness, weaving nightmares into reality. The ritual to summon it mirrored events in her own home. The sea captain, Amelia's husband, was a man haunted by shadows. His voyages had taken him to the far corners of the earth, exposing him to wonders and horrors that most men could only imagine. But it was on a nameless island, shrouded in mist and legend, that he encountered the true cost of his ambition. He brought back more than just exotic spices and tales of adventure. He unknowingly carried with him a curse, a malevolent entity that attached itself to him, feeding on his guilt and despair. His wife, Amelia, sensitive to the unseen world, recognized the darkness that clung to him, the insidious evil that poisoned his soul. The entity, threatened by Amelia's light, her unwavering love for her husband, sought to isolate her, to break her spirit. It whispered doubts into her husband's ears, poisoning his thoughts, turning his love into suspicion and resentment. The once happy home became a battleground, their love a casualty in the entity's insidious campaign of terror. And Amelia, desperate to save her husband, to break the curse that held him captive, stumbled upon a forbidden ritual, a dangerous gamble that promised salvation or damnation. Guided by a tattered grimoire, Amelia sought to confront the entity and banish it back to the abyss. She chose the attic, inscribed ancient symbols, and chanted words of power. The air crackled with energy as the entity stirred, its rage growing. The room grew cold. The entity manifested, its eyes burning with malice. Amelia stood her ground, her voice unwavering. A blinding flash of light, and Amelia was gone. The entity retreated, its hunger unsated. It would wait. Armed with the knowledge from Amelia's journal, John and Sarah prepared to confront the entity. They followed the ritual meticulously, their voices echoing Amelia's words. The air crackled with anticipation, shadows danced with a life of their own, each object pulsed with a faint ethereal light. Lily sensed the entity's growing rage. She reached out to touch the silver locket. A jolt of energy surged through the room. The entity materialized, its form a terrifying tableau of shadows and energy. The ritual had begun. The entity lunged, its shadowy claws reaching for Lily. Sarah's chant rose above the entity's roar, a lifeline of hope. John stood protectively in front of his children, his body a shield. The locket in Lily's hand pulsed with a blinding light. The air crackled with energy, the house vibrating intensely. The entity writhed in agony, burning in the light. The light faded, leaving behind a profound silence. The entity was gone, banished back to the abyss. John, Sarah, and their children lay huddled together, drained but unbroken. A chill ran down their spines as they looked at the empty spot. Scratched into the plaster was a chilling message. It is not over. The entity was gone for now, but its hunger for revenge lingered, a promise of darkness to come. The silence after the entity's retreat was deafening, heavy with unseen eyes and unspoken threats. The chilling message, "It is not over," lingered, a reminder of their precarious victory. The Thompsons were irrevocably changed. Their sanctuary violated, their security shattered. Lily, once bubbly, now moved with disconcerting stillness. She whispered of shadows and voices from the darkness. Sarah clung to Amelia's journal, searching for hope. She pored over its pages, seeking answers. The house whispered warnings that chilled her to the bone. John, his security shattered, transformed into a man possessed. He barricaded the house, creating a fortress against an unseen enemy. His every action spoke of a desperate battle against encroaching madness. The house, once a place of warmth and laughter, had become a living entity, its very structure seemingly infected by the entity's malevolent presence. The walls, once silent witnesses to their lives, now whispered secrets in the dead of night, their voices a chorus of whispers that sent shivers down their spines. Daniel, caught between childhood innocence and the terrifying reality of the situation, retreated into a world of forced silence. He flinched at every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves against the boarded-up windows, his young mind bombarded by unseen terrors, his imagination painting horrific images on the canvas of his fear. The symbols, appearing overnight like a malignant rash, spread across the walls, their meaning indecipherable yet undeniably menacing. Sarah, her fingers tracing their intricate lines, felt a jolt of cold dread course through her, as if the very walls pulsed with an energy that was both ancient and evil. They were trapped in a nightmare, their home a prison of whispers and shadows. John, his sanity hanging by a thread, patrolled the house with a shotgun clutched in his hand, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, his ears straining for any sign of the entity's return. He jumped at every sound, his finger twitching on the trigger, his mind teetering on the precipice of a darkness from which there was no return. Days turned into weeks, each one a descent into a waking nightmare. Sleep offered no escape, haunted by vivid nightmares that bled into their waking hours, blurring the lines between reality and the entity's insidious influence. They were exhausted, their nerves frayed, their minds teetering on the edge of a precipice. Sarah, her once bright eyes now clouded with fear and exhaustion, struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy for her children's sake. But the house, like a virus, infected their minds, twisting their perceptions, amplifying their fears, turning their love for each other into a weapon that the entity wielded with cruel precision. John, once a pillar of strength, now teetered on the brink of a breakdown. His outbursts of anger, fueled by paranoia and helplessness, terrified his family, the man they knew disappearing beneath a wave of fear and despair. The entity, it seemed, was winning, its insidious influence poisoning their minds, turning them against each other. Lily, her young mind the most susceptible to the entity's influence, embraced the darkness with a disturbing alacrity. She spoke of the entity as a friend, a confidant, her words sending shivers down her parents' spines. Their daughter, their sweet Lily, was slipping away, replaced by something alien, something unsettling. One morning, a new note appeared, pinned to the wall in the center of the living room. It was not Amelia's familiar script, but a scrawled message trembling with fear and urgency. "Don't trust her. She's not your daughter anymore." Sarah's gaze darted to Lily, who sat calmly, humming softly, her eyes unsettling. Her daughter, her sweet Lily, was gone, replaced by something monstrous. The entity was returning, bringing hell with it. A palpable wave of dread swept through the house, chilling the air and sending a tremor through its very foundation. The entity was back, its presence heralded by a symphony of creaking wood, whispering shadows, and the blood-curdling screams of the wind as it howled through the boarded-up windows. The Thompsons, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and grim acceptance, huddled together, their love for each other the only shield against the encroaching darkness. Lily, her body now a vessel for the entity's terrifying power, rose effortlessly into the air, her laughter a chilling echo of the innocent joy she once possessed. Dark energy crackled around her, contorting the air and casting grotesque shadows that danced with a life of their own. John and Sarah, their hearts shattering at the sight of their daughter consumed by such malevolence, knew that the time for reason, for hope, had passed. The entity had them right where it wanted them, trapped in a nightmare of its own making. John, his face contorted in a mask of rage and grief, raised his shotgun, his finger trembling on the trigger. This was his last stand, a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter, even if it meant ending the nightmare in the most final way imaginable. Sarah, her heart breaking at the sight of her husband forced to confront such an impossible choice, knew that there were no winners in this battle, only survivors. A blinding white light brighter than the sun erupted from Lily, engulfing the house in a wave of pure energy. The air crackled and popped, the very walls seeming to buckle under the strain. An ear-splitting roar, a primal scream of rage and despair echoed through the house, shaking the very foundation of their reality. And then, silence. A palpable wave of dread swept through the house, chilling the air and sending a tremor through its very foundation. The entity was back, its presence heralded by a symphony of creaking wood, whispering shadows, and the blood-curdling screams of the wind as it howled through the boarded-up windows. The Thompsons, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and grim acceptance, huddled together, their love for each other the only shield against the encroaching darkness. Lily, her body now a vessel for the entity's terrifying power, rose effortlessly into the air, her laughter a chilling echo of the innocent joy she once possessed. Dark energy crackled around her, contorting the air and casting grotesque shadows that danced with a life of their own. John and Sarah, their hearts shattering at the sight of their daughter consumed by such malevolence, knew that the time for reason, for hope, had passed. The entity had them right where it wanted them, trapped in a nightmare of its own making. John, his face contorted in a mask of rage and grief, raised his shotgun, his finger trembling on the trigger. This was his last stand, a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter, even if it meant ending the nightmare in the most final way imaginable. Sarah, her heart breaking at the sight of her husband forced to confront such an impossible choice, knew that there were no winners in this battle, only survivors. A blinding white light brighter than the sun erupted from Lily, engulfing the house in a wave of pure energy. The air crackled and popped, the very walls seeming to buckle under the strain. An ear-splitting roar, a primal scream of rage and despair echoed through the house, shaking the very foundation of their reality. And then, silence. The house stood, a shattered husk of its former self. Debris littered the floor, furniture smashed beyond recognition, walls defaced with strange symbols and scorch marks. The air, thick with the smell of ozone and burnt wood, hung heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the creaking of the damaged structure. Amidst the wreckage, a single yellowed note lay untouched, illuminated by a shaft of sunlight. The handwriting was Amelia's, her words a chilling reminder that the entity might be gone, but the darkness it represented was eternal. "Beware the whispers," the note read, the ink faded but the message clear. "They will always find you." The house remained abandoned, a chilling reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The town whispered of the Thompson family, their fate a mystery, their story a cautionary tale whispered around campfires and in hushed tones. Some say the house is quiet now, the entity's power broken. Others claim that the whispers remain, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross the threshold, to become another chapter in the house's dark history. The notes, scattered amidst the wreckage, held the key to the mystery, a chronicle of fear and despair, of love and sacrifice. But some truths are too terrible to comprehend, some stories too terrifying to tell. The notes remain, a testament to the darkness that lies at the heart of every human soul, a chilling reminder that some nightmares never truly end.